A title reads Self-Awareness, Identity. Text appears over a blurred background image of the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
As individual human beings, we have characteristics, relationships, experiences, values, and beliefs that make us uniquely who we are. These factors make up our identity and give us our sense of self. When we talk with others about ourselves, we can decide the language we want to use to describe our personal identities and the factors that make up those identities. This language may change over time with different life experiences and as we have different relationships. In this video, individuals talk about the language they use when they discuss their blindness or low vision. Some people refer to themselves as blind. Some people prefer to call themselves visually impaired. Others use person-first language. While all of these individuals identify their blindness or low vision in a particular way, they view it as only one characteristic of who they are, a part of their identity.
A young Black visually impaired woman speaks to the camera from her home.
My name is Demetria Ober. I am 21 years old now, and I go to school at Texas Women's University. I'm a junior studying social work and medical Spanish interpretation. I would say I am a person that experiences blindness. I will say visually impaired in some cases, but just to make it more general, I'll like when I'm introducing myself or writing about myself, I'll always say person experiencing blindness. When I'm describing it to other people, I try not to use any sort of medical terms or anything because it would be interesting to say like, oh, I have congenital maculopathy cone rod dystrophy, and people are like, what? So usually I'll just be like, the macula in my eye, which helps you see like fine details and things like that far away, it stopped working. So I'm not able to see fine details, and sometimes colors start to look the same, and I can't see far away very well. So I just try to make it as broad as possible. First, I think it's important for me to use person-first identity because some people can get so wrapped up in, oh, you have a disability, oh, you're blind, that they forget that like I'm still human, I'm still a person. So introducing myself as I'm a person that experiences blindness or experiences a disability, it just makes it kind of reinforces the idea that I'm still a person and my blindness or my disability is not who I am, it's just my experience. And then choosing to kind of make when I'm describing what I can and cannot see to people, choosing to make it less medical term and more kind of straightforward to the point. I think it helps to not sound so scary because when people hear I say, oh, macular degeneration or something like that, they kind of get like, oh my gosh, are you okay? So just telling them like, oh, I can't see small print or I can't see little details or I can't see far away. It just kind of makes the conversation more, I guess, open to where they're more encouraged or they feel more inclined to ask questions about it versus if I throw out some medical terms and the conversation just ends. That's just from my experience. That's what I noticed has helped me.
A young Hispanic woman speaks to the camera from her home.
My name's Adeline Granger. I'm a licensed cosmetologist and cosmetology educator. I actually work at the School for the Blind on the weekends at Weekends Home. And right now I'm back in school. I'm majoring in psychology at Austin Community College, hoping to transfer by the fall. I identify as being visually impaired because my vision for having an eye disease is still pretty good. I do have a degenerative eye disease, but for now I say I'm visually impaired. Unless someone just quite doesn't get it, then I'll just tell them I'm blind. I describe it by saying that it's kind of like macular degeneration because there are some people who are familiar with that. So I say it's like that. But if you need a picture, when I talk to them and I say, if you need a picture, what I see is it's like there's a painting in front of me or there's a picture. And then somebody took the middle of the picture and smudged it a little, but just the middle. So I just explained that my central vision's a bit distorted. Kind of makes Lines a little wavy.
A young Mexican man speaks to the camera from his home.
I am Salvador Villa, but I go by Sal. I am a 21-year-old college student at ACC, waiting to transfer to the University of Texas here at Austin. I mainly coach sports for the Boys and Girls Clubs here at the Austin area, and I love to cook, play drums, exercise, and be a foodie. I've been blind since birth. I was born at 7 months. And the main reason why my parents, or mainly my mom, decided to immigrate to the United States was because of my blindness. When, they were running tests on my eyes to figure out what my cause of blindness was in Mexico, they knew it was retinopathy of prematurity, but any further tests and all that sort of stuff, they were not sure on how to go about it. So they suggested my mom come to Houston, which is where I had 2 of my eye surgeries. But ever since day one, I remember my mom saying, using the word blind around me, calling me a blind student, a blind child. She never tried to sugarcoat it, but she always emphasized how you're blind, but it doesn't really matter. You can still go to school. You can still learn like the other kids. You can read like the other kids. So I'm blind, and that's that. There's no way around it. I use a cane. I read Braille. I use screen readers. I'm blind. This is how it is. So that's the word I use. When people say, "Oh, what's your visual acuity?" It's like, I don't know. I'm just blind. That's all. I don't pay attention to that because it's not a big priority for me. It doesn't matter how much I can or can't see, as long as I can do my job and get my message across to my audience. That's all that matters at the end of the day. I was comfortable, right? But as far as expressing my thoughts on my blindness or the cause or how I go about it, it didn't really happen until maybe 8th grade, right? Because I didn't know any better. I just knew I was blind, but I didn't know the roots of the alternative skills I was using. I just knew that that's what worked for me. So I didn't really know how to explain all those concepts to people in elementary school and part of middle school. But as I grew up and you read more, you get to learn more, you get to know more people and have different life experiences. That's the key. And to me, the key was having experiences with other students and teachers to where you blend into what they're doing because you're all working towards the same task. So like in band, it's all the same music. We all want to win the same contest. We all want to perform the same way in the concert. So you are working towards the same goal and placing as much effort to the point where the blindness is overseen. The questions still come up, at the end of rehearsal or during, where you're switching songs, or if you're shooting free throws at the park, or you're doing like, pick up basketball, the questions will come slowly, and you as a blind person, you want to be open to those questions, right? You're not going to just shut people's questions down because you don't feel comfortable. People want to learn. And the thing is, a lot of people are not used to asking questions or asking them the right way. So you have to be open to understanding that people are not always going to ask you in the most pleasant way, right? Because I think a lot of people ask questions based on how they see things, no matter what it was. They, it just pops in their brain and they just ask, right? So as a kid, I was always timid about that. But as I grew up and people started asking me more questions, besides teachers, it was either you tell these people how you go about life, or you're an outsider. So what do you want to do? Do you want to just be seen as the kid that walks around with a cane in school with a teacher everywhere? Or as the guy that can nail a free throw every time you need him to when it comes to playing basketball after school?
A still photo of the face of a blind Caucasian woman in her home.
I'm Norma Crosby, president of the National Federation of the Blind of Texas. I'm currently retired, so I don't have a job other than all the work I do for the Federation. But for more than 30 years, I managed the office for my family's business. My husband and I ran a private food service business in the Houston area. We had several locations throughout the city. And a few years ago, we chose to retire. And now I work pretty much full-time as a volunteer for the NFB of Texas. So I'm a person who was born with low vision as a result of a birth defect. And so I've been blind all my life. I grew up in a small community where I was the only blind person in town, had very little special education, as we would call it now, but went to school throughout my school career in a public school. Today, I think of myself as a blind person, even though I do have a little bit of usable vision, and I do use that vision whenever it makes sense to use it. My vocabulary about my blindness has definitely evolved over the years. You know, when I grew up, I told you that I was the only blind person in town. And everyone, my mother always introduced me when I was growing up by saying, "This is my daughter, Norma, and she doesn't see very well." And that used to really offend me. It bothered me. It was one of the few things that bothered me about my mother, because generally she allowed me to be independent and she allowed me to participate in activities and even encouraged it. But she always like pinned a label on me that I didn't like very much, because the truth is I didn't really understand where I fit into the world. I knew I didn't see like everyone else, but I knew I wasn't totally blind either. And I don't know that I really even understood the concept of the difference, because I was the only blind person I knew. I didn't know, you know, I didn't have an understanding of what that vocabulary would look like. I always tell people about a story that happened to me when I was about 10 or 12 years old. And that is, a rehabilitation professional came to our town. He was my counselor, I suppose, with the Commission for the Blind at that time. And he brought me a Braille watch. And so I was really excited, because I was a little girl who was always looking for a place like, where do I belong in the world? And when he brought me the Braille watch, I thought that meant I'm a blind person. I must belong in the world of the blind. So then I got the idea that I should ask him to teach me Braille, because nobody else was. I knew enough about blindness to know that Braille existed, or, you know, but not much else. So I really didn't understand what I was asking for. So I begged him to teach me Braille. And after he had given me the watch, he said, "Well, you really shouldn't waste my time asking me to teach you Braille, because you're not really a blind person." And so I was really very, very confused about where I did belong. I knew I didn't belong in the sighted world, and I apparently didn't belong in the blind world either, according to this guy. So I really got to feel like I didn't belong anywhere. So over the years, though, later in life, I did get to know some blind people. I met the first group of blind people that I ever knew when I attended a summer school program at the School for the Blind. And I didn't really learn that much about blindness, but I got to be around other blind people, and I sort of began to think, well, maybe this is the community I do belong to. But then again, I kept getting signals from professionals in the field of work with the blind that I wasn't really blind, and it was much better, no matter how hard it was for me, if I could just learn to see better. If I could see what they wanted me to see, then I was a good student, I was a good person. That was definitely the feeling I got. And that blindness, it wasn't respectable. I began to be more successful myself when I began to realize that it's okay to be blind and to just call yourself blind. And so that's what I choose to do.
A still photo of the face of a young Caucasian woman in her home.
My name is Ashley Pryor, and I am at Texas Women's University, and I study social work, and I'm graduating in 5 days on May 7th. And I am from Houston, but I live in Denton, Texas, and I plan to live in the DFW area, or I would like to. And I have a guide dog. I feel like that's where I really have grown to become like myself, and I feel like that will continue to be growing. I did like clarify myself when I meet somebody. I say like, "Hi, my name is Ashley Pryor. I am visually impaired, but more like legally blind." So I say both, and I feel like that puts people at ease when you not like I don't know how to really word it, but when you like kind of, "Hi, I'm visually impaired, but I'm like legally blind." So when you kind of just throw it in there like a natural like easy kind of tone and you're like cool about it, I feel like that makes people at ease. So I do say both because I have a little bit of vision, but I am like not at all. So I do use both. It depends on the person. You know, some people you just say, you know, I see nothing because it's just like easier to just be like, oh yeah, I see nothing. And then some people, you know, I do give it a description and I really do explain it. I'm like, my vision is a donut. In the central, I see nothing. And like in the donut portion, I see like very, 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 very blurry. And then I see a bunch of fireworks. And then the peripheral of the donut, so like the outside portion of the donut, it's very like watery and a very like yellowy water. So if that makes any type of sense, and most sighted people are like, oh, that's a lot going on. But that's the best I know how to explain my vision. I think because if they can get to know me and that like, yes, like I'm not sighted, but that doesn't mean that like I'm different, you know, like I have like a visual impairment and yes, I have like accommodations that come with that, but like I'm still a human, I'm still a person, and I still like deserve every right that you do. So like if you know my visual impairment and you know that like what's going on in my eyes, like you can also understand that like I am a person inside, instead of like thinking that I'm weird or you think that like I'm just different. Like you can actually like get to know me. And so when you meet another blind person or you meet another individual that is different than just what we call the norm, you would actually like get to know them instead of like putting us as the outcast. So I think that's why it's really important to like describe your vision or describe like, hey, I'm legally blind or visually impaired, and just throw it out there so that they can be at ease with it. And then you just move on about your day so they can get to know who you actually really are.
A young Latino male speaks to the camera from his office.
I am Gabe Casares. I'm the director of the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. I grew up in Houston, Texas. I went to college and studied political science, went off to the Baltimore, D.C. area and worked for the National Federation of the Blind's Government Affairs Department, worked with Congress, worked with federal legislation and policy, and then got the chance to come back to Texas to really bring those skills and hone them more at the local level and work on policy at the local level and promoting accessibility throughout the city of Houston. I choose to call myself a blind person, and I think I need to unpack that a little bit. I have some vision. I have some light perception. I can distinguish some colors, but for all intents and purposes, I don't have any, what you would call usable vision. I rely on using my cane and braille and alternative techniques to do everyday tasks. So because of that, I call myself a blind person because I think that represents my disability well. I'm not opposed to talking to people about my specific eye condition. I don't usually bring it up. I think a lot of people, when I tell them that I'm a blind person, are satisfied with that answer. They're happy enough with that answer. But when people have asked me, I simply tell them that I have glaucoma. And people go off when I do say that. People often do say, oh, that's usually an old people disease. And I explain to them that glaucoma is hereditary in our family. So it's something that I think passes down from parents to siblings on our side of the family. So that's one of the ways that I really talk about my specific eye condition, but I don't normally volunteer that information. I think for a long time, people talked about people with disabilities, but really the passage of the things like the ADA gave a lot of people with disabilities what we've come to call disability pride. My blindness is integral to my identity. It's shaped a lot of the experiences that I have had as a young adult. So that's why I think it's important to identify myself in that way.
Norma Crosby speaking.
the first piece of advice I would have for our students, no matter how they identify right now, whether it's visually impaired, low vision, blind, I would say be yourself along the journey is the first thing. But I also would say, I think it's really important as you determine what your identity is going to look like to make sure you have all the tools to make those choices. I know, for example, growing up for me, everyone who was a professional in my life told me I didn't need the tools of blindness. That, again, I mentioned it earlier, that if I could just see everything, it would be so much better. People would think better of me, and people would identify better with me than if I just came out and said, hey, I'm a blind guy, and it's okay to be a blind guy. And not only that, I'm going to use these non-visual tools to help me be the independent person that I really can be, as opposed to struggling. My strong advice is add the tools to your toolbox, because then you have a choice. If your only tool that's in your toolbox is vision, then you have no choice. And I think once you have those tools, self-identity becomes really less of an issue for you. I think very often people who struggle with whether I'm blind, whether I'm low vision, whether I'm visually impaired, they're somehow, they've been taught mostly by sighted people, but sometimes by other blind people as well, that it's not okay to be blind. It's not okay to use those non-visual techniques, even if they work better. And by the way, we're often taught that they don't work better, even though we know that there are studies, there's evidence to prove that they actually do. And so my advice is definitely, whatever tools you get the chance to add to your toolbox, add them. And then you have the ability to make the choice about when vision works for you and when it doesn't. And I think it'll become less of a struggle to determine what your identity is.
Text appears over a blurred background image of the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
As a person who is blind or has low vision, each of us decides how we will identify ourselves. We may choose to say we are blind, visually impaired, have low vision, or are a person who experiences blindness. Some of us may choose to identify our specific eye condition and explain it in detail, while others choose to describe it in more general terms. How we identify may change as we reflect on our life experiences and become more self-aware. Think about these experiences and characteristics that make you who you are, and consider what language you would use to describe your own identity.
A title reads Self-Awareness, Identity. Screen fades to black.